In this video, we'll be taking a look at the different systems in Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Far Cry 4. Even though these two games may not look very similar at first glance, when you start to look a little deeper at the systems they use to create their gameplay, they are a lot alike. I'm going to be showing you a comparison of each of these systems to help demonstrate my point. But first, to help you understand exactly what I'm talking about, let's take a look at what a game system actually is. When I'm referring to a game system throughout this video, I do not mean any of these. There are many different ways of explaining this. First, a system has to have many constituent elements which have some property in common. Next, it is a set of objects together which have relationships between the objects and between their attributes. And finally, a system is a set of parts that interrelate to form a complex whole. To sum this up and make it a little easier to understand what I just said, basically a game system is a small part of a game that does something. When these separate parts are brought together, they create a full game experience. As well as this, you can also have subsystems, which link into bigger overarching systems. These are designed to help that system do its job better. When developing a game system for any game, the developer also has to think about what players find fun or entertaining, and build the systems around this key element. To show you how these systems can be very similar across multiple games, I'll be isolating individual elements of these games, allowing me to focus on their particular function. An example of this would be the progression system in Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. The progression system within games is usually very similar, and like in these two games, it mainly consists of three factors: completing main missions, side missions, and random events. Doing this gives the player a set of goals that he or she can aim to achieve throughout the game, meaning there's always something for them to work towards. To help with progression in these games, they employ a subsystem, the narrative system. Cutscenes are used as a way of guiding the player through the story bit by bit and giving a purpose to the actions they take throughout the game. In Assassin's Creed, these systems work like this all the time, all the way until the end. Far Cry follows this same path, but alternatively it adds an extra layer to this system, because at the start of the game it gives a player a choice without them even knowing it. They can either do what they were told in the cutscene, or follow the objective on screen and leave. If the player chooses to stay in the room, these systems are not used much because doing so skips the story straight to the end and cuts out all the gameplay in the middle. However, if the player chooses to follow the on-screen instructions, they will start to be using the tutorial system. Each game uses their first level as a way of showing the player all the different mechanics they can use throughout the game. Both games also use an objective subsystem to help achieve this. Far Cry mainly relies on this system to guide the player throughout the environment during missions, with the occasional hint pop-up giving players more information about a certain mechanic within the game. In Assassin's Creed, however, the system is more in-depth. As well as using on-screen indicators to direct the player to key points, it also uses in-game clues telling the player what each button does when they get close to something they can interact with or trigger. An example of this is when it tells the player they can press a certain button when above an enemy to initiate an air assassination. As you can see, this system is used in both games, with one holding the player's hand a little more than the other. But also, both games keep the objective system in use throughout the entire game. This is because the developer needs the player to get to certain points within the environment so they can progress on the mission. If this was not in the game, the player could get lost and would not know what they needed to do. But the player wouldn't even be able to get that far if the movement system wasn't in the game. This is a staple for pretty much every game, but some developers add extra bits to the basic system in the hopes of making the movement in their game unique. Even though it may look different, Assassin's Creed and Far Cry actually have a fairly similar movement system, depending on the environment that the player is in. To start off with, both games feature the core movement system that most first and third person games have, that everyone knows, but then adds extra bits to this system like the grappling hook, giving the game more verticality and the player more options to explore the environment. Even though in Assassin's Creed it allows the player to use the grappling hook in more places than Far Cry, in both games it is still determined on where the player is. On top of this system, the games also add very similar subsystems. First, there is the system for vehicle movement. Even though in Far Cry you are controlling a car, and in Assassin's Creed you are controlling a horse and cart, the controls are pretty much identical, further enforcing my statement that even though the games may look different, they can also be very similar. Then if the player doesn't want to use a vehicle to get around, and would prefer a faster option, they can use the navigation system. This brings up a map of the whole world, allowing the player to see a 2D representation of where they are, and also the ability to fast travel to key points on the map. Without this, the game could start to feel quite boring and taxing after a while. If the player had to travel slowly from one side of the world to the other all the time just to do a mission, they would start to become stressed and might go and play something else entirely. The last subsystem for movement is a stealth system, which is initiated when players crouch in-game. For both games, this shortens the enemy's field of view and makes the player's movement a lot quieter, allowing the player to reach some areas unseen and sneak up next to enemies, giving the player the opportunity to interact with a totally different system. That system is the AI system. It's used to control any non-player characters. This can mean both friendly and enemy. This system is also linked to the narrative system, but the main thing I want to look at is the subsystem, that allows players to offensively interact with the AI throughout the world. This subsystem is the combat system. It allows the player to work with the AI system and make it do what they want. For example, there are two different types of combat in these games, shooting and melee. First, shooting. Only one of three things can really happen here. Either the player shoots and kills the AI, the player and the AI start a gunfight, or the AI shoots and kills the player. This is the same in both games. Next, melee. This is slightly different between each game, but in Far Cry there's only one option, to perform a melee takedown, which is a guaranteed kill on an enemy. But by pressing additional buttons, you can chain kills together. There is a similar melee system in Assassin's Creed, allowing you to do the same thing, but melee combat is focused on more than in Far Cry, meaning the player can do more. In Assassin's Creed there are three different things that can happen, the above being one of them, but the system can also trigger a melee battle, or the AI can melee you. So overall, Assassin's Creed focuses more on a melee-based combat system, whereas Far Cry focuses on a more shooter-style combat system. But then on top of this, both games allow for friendly AI, which help you out in fights. The enemy AI will then focus their attacks on the friendlies if the player is further away. One system that most games have, that Assassin's Creed and Far Cry demonstrate well, is a reward/loot system. This system is designed to keep the player engaged and make them want to play the game. This can be seen through the game rewarding the player at the end of each mission, or just interacting with the environment in different ways. For example, the chests and crates scattered throughout the environment. The main things that tend to be given to players across both of these games as rewards is XP, currency, random items, or upgrade tokens. This can then be stored in an inventory subsystem, which can be used by another system like crafting and upgrading. Here, the player can use their random items or currency found throughout their playtime to upgrade or craft new weapons and equipment, but they can also use their upgrade tokens that they have collected to unlock special abilities and perks. All this helps the player with their progression throughout the game and allows them to have different options and, more importantly, choice when it comes to interacting with the environment and AI scattered throughout the world. Some other systems I will quickly touch on before I finish is the synchronization system, day, night and weather system, plus the customization system. First, synchronization. It isn't just in Assassin's Creed, it's in Far Cry as well. This system is put in place so the player can feel more immersed in the world. Also, it helps point out key areas to the player that they should go and visit. In Assassin's Creed, the system is activated by climbing up specified tall buildings and landmarks and pressing the interact button in a specific location. In Far Cry, in a very similar way, the system is activated by interacting with a radio on top of a tall bell tower. In both games, the time of day is controlled by a system, allowing for the mood and lighting to be changed universally throughout the world, making for a more believable player experience. But also, a subsystem can affect this: the weather. An example of this is in Far Cry, with weather effects such as snow and fog being used. Also, in Far Cry, there's no rain and has kind of a strange day and night cycle, as it only works when the player is moving. This type of system is known as a dynamic system because it transforms over time during gameplay. Finally, both games feature a customization system, which gives player choice on things such as what they want to look like in-game or what weapon they want to use during combat. In Far Cry, this system is known as the shop. This is where the player can swap out their weapon, add attachments, and change the visuals of the weapon by adding a camouflage. In Far Cry, the customization system is focused on this, as it is the main thing the player will see during gameplay, because of the first-person perspective. In Assassin's Creed, even though it allows the player to choose their melee weapon of choice, this system is more focused on the appearance of the character in-game, as it's the main thing they'll be seeing when playing, due to the third-person perspective. As you can see throughout this video, two games don't always have to look visually similar for them to be alike, and I hope I explained this concept well. Thanks for watching.